And welcome to everyone to the ISGAN Academy webinar of today. The title of the webinar is Regulatory Sandboxes for Smart Energy Systems. What should innovators and researchers know about it? This webinar is hosted by ISGAN. In the next slide, we can see that ISGAN is the short name for International Smart Grid Action Network. That is the short name for the International Energy Agency Technology Collaboration Program. ISGAN is also an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial, formally established in 2011. ISGAN creates a strategic platform to support high-level government attention and action for the accelerated development and deployment of smarter and cleaner electricity grids around the world. In the next slide, we can see that ISGAN currently consists of 27 contracted parties. The nominated representative form the executive committee headed by the Presidium, assisted by 2 co-secretariats and the operating agents of ISGAN. In the next slide, we can see that ISGAN's vision is to accelerate progress on the key aspects of the smart grid policy, technology and investment through voluntary participation by governments in specific projects and programs. Its activities focus on 5 principal areas: policy standards and regulation, finance and business models, technology system development, workforce skills and knowledge, users and consumers engagement. ISGAN facilitates dynamic knowledge sharing, technology assistance, peer review, and project coordination among its contracted parties. The next slide shows that the ISGAN value proposition relies on conference and workshops, policy and technology briefs, discussion and technical papers, casebooks, and webinars. Within ISGAN, in the next slide, we can see that the ISGAN Academy activity offers the ISGAN community means of rational and efficient continuous technical skills complement and update in the field of smart grids. The Academy is proposed as a set of e-learning core modules dealing with the entire value chain of smart grids. Fundamentals and reading rules, webinars organized or hosted by the Clean Energy Solutions Center. In the next slide, we present the webinar of today. The title is Regulatory Sandbox for Smart Energy Systems. What should innovators and researchers know about it? The webinar focuses on what smart energy system innovators and researchers should know about the regulatory sandboxes and other regulatory experimenting as measures for accelerating the transition to a global clean energy economy. First-hand information about related activities in several countries and policy messages to the Clean Energy Ministerial are provided. Moreover, experts and practitioners discuss how new projects on smart energy systems can upscale their projects in regulatory sandboxes. The speakers that we have today are Helena Lindqvist, Magnus Olofsson, Klaus Kubeczko, Dirk Bauchnet, Nicole Kerkhoff, Rachel Levin, and Urban Baker. The webinar today has several sessions or roundtable among the speakers, and at the end we will have a question and answer session where the speakers will answer to the question posed by the audience. The recording of the webinar will be available through the ISGAN YouTube channel. Now I leave the floor to the speakers, in particular to Magnus, that will introduce the topics of today. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Matteo, for introducing. And I will just briefly start by going through the agenda. And following the introduction, we will have a few words about the knowledge transfer platform process that has been used for this project, within this project, by Helena Lindqvist, who will speak about it. And we will also get a kind of scientific background on regulatory sandboxes and experimenting from Klaus and Dirk. We will have the opportunity to see a short video with a world tour from some selected countries. This is actually part of a longer video that is was presented at the last week SAM 12 event. Then we will go through, that was actually the core part of the SEM 12 contribution, the policy messages on the topic. So we will go through these messages, and then we will have a panel with focusing on this this particular topic of translation into Innovators world. We will have the Dutch program, the Australian program, and Ontario from Canada in the panel. And finally, we will have the Q&A session, and you are most welcome to make comments and questions in the chat forum. And if you could help us with writing to whom you are kind of addressing potentially the question or the comment, it's very helpful. So, so that's kind of the agenda. And I will just give a very short background here about the Sandbox project that we are actually kind of completing with this webinar. We actually started 2 years ago with a project 2019 then on an Iscan international knowledge exchange on sandboxes. That was kind of an introductory project. It was done in collaboration with ISER, the International Confederation of Energy Regulators. So we gathered many experts in this event, and the project focus here in this project is how to maximize learning from regulatory experimenting such as sandboxes. And we have been working intensively with policymakers, regulatory bodies, and research actors from 15 countries on 3 continents. And we have been doing this for a couple of months in the beginning of this year. And it has been very, very interesting and very rewarding, I would say, for many of us, I think all of us participating in this project. And we have also kind of made some innovation in the process of how to do this knowledge exchange or sharing. So we have actually had national meetings, many of us in the various countries, and also international workshops. So we have kind of been toggling between the national and the international level, and that's benefiting on kind of both the international and the national levels. So I'm very happy myself, and I think we all are in the project team. And actually here is the project team that actually managed the kind of project. Then of course most important are all the participants, but I mean we had a like core team for the organization, and this is the Iscan team then. Okay, by that I think we should move into one piece of kind of a tool that we have used, very kind of famous tool within Iscan, the Iscan knowledge transfer platform. So I won't say more. I will just hand over to you, Helena Lindqvist, to give us a background and fit this project into the other initiatives or other projects that we have been running using this tool. So please, Helena.
Thank you very much, Magnus, and it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I will just give a bit of context to this project. And the ISGAN knowledge transfer platform has been developed since 2016 when we did the first pilot. And since then, we have done 8 projects, and this is the latest among them. And what's special about this knowledge transfer platform is that it's very interactive, and is very much focused on both individual and organizational learning to enable action and implementation on the ground in different countries. And it's a combination also of knowledge sharing between people, but also co-creation of new ideas on based on the existing knowledge. And it's all meant to accelerate the energy transition, really. And on the right-hand side here, you can see some examples of previous projects that we have done within this platform. So next one, please. What we did for this project, we introduced actually a new design for this. Like Magnus mentioned, we have been combining the international level of knowledge sharing with stakeholder involvement and customization to national contexts in different countries, and we've had 5 or 6 countries that opted for this method that have proved very, very fruitful, and we have seen that there has been given rise to really a lot of dialogue at national level. So that's been very, very interesting. So it's a bit of a test for this project that has we've seen very good results from. Another innovation this time round was also that we used a 2-tier process, enabling both deep dive interactive knowledge sharing amongst those that really want and have the resources to commit to a longer process in several steps, but also giving the opportunity for those that want to kind of follow what's being developed with a bit more kind of a observer role. So yes, but this is in short the overview of the process that has led up to the results that will be presented by Klaus and Dirk later today. So we started with an introductory webinar for everyone that was interested basically in January, and then we open up this 2-tier process in which those who really wanted to go into this deep dive dialogue could do so, whereas others could kind of jump in at the end and just look at the results. So we had 3 international workshops, and in between those workshops we had national stakeholder meetings, so where the participants were able to kind of translate the discussions from the international level down to the national level and see what is relevant, what is not, what could we do with this, and then also feedback up into the international dialogue again. So that was the point of that, and this has all then resulted in these sort of knowledge products, primarily the policy messages that we presented. We were selected to present in a video for the Clean Energy Ministerial meeting that took place last week. So we're very proud and grateful for that opportunity. And also we will have an Iscan casebook is being developed right now and will be published later in the summer or after the summer. And today we have the Iscan Academy webinar. And on top of this, and it wasn't really part of the plan from the beginning, was we've seen such strong international enthusiasm for a dialogue about this topic. So we have started some sort of community of practice that to continue this discussion and build upon those international relations that we have created during this project. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Helena. That was very clear. I hope to understand how we also develop the knowledge sharing platform and work. Now we are going to get the background on regulatory sandboxes and regulatory experimenting, and I'm very happy. I mean, we have a very strong team, I would say, and now I would like to introduce Klaus Kubeczko and Dirk Bauknecht, which are both our scientists in this field. So on a high level. So please, the floor is yours, and you will give us the background and introduction here on the topic. So please.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks, Magnus. I will start to give you a bit of background. What do we mean by regulatory experiments, and specifically regulatory sandboxes? What is it about? We've tried to provide a definition here. So regulatory experiments are about deviating from the current regulatory framework and do that on purpose, deliberately deviating. And the idea is to try out new regulation, new legal rules that are different from the current regulatory setting, and to try out these different rules in a real world setting. So it's not about modeling, but it's really about trying it out in practice and to get practical experiences from this. And such regulatory experiments can be seen as an instrument for learning for the different actors that are involved. And obviously they're not the only instrument for learning. There are other approaches, more conventional approaches to learn about a new regulation, but also there are lots of pilot projects on technical solutions. Regulatory experiments can be an additional tool to complement that. I think that's quite important. And within that box of regulatory experiments, there is one specific tool, Regulatory Sandboxes, that are specifically designed to provide a framework for socio-technical experiments. So here the innovation is really new technologies, new business cases, maybe also new social innovations, and regulatory experiments or regulatory sandboxes in this case provide a framework so that these new solutions can be tried out, which would not be possible or would be more difficult in the existing regulatory framework. So they, in that sense, regulatory sandboxes are a tool for enabling innovation.
To come to the energy system transition more concretely, we did a survey and asked for activities with respect to regulatory experimenting, particularly regulatory sandboxes. So currently on this map, you can see about 12 countries who either have started regulatory experimenting activities in their energy sector, those on the map in yellow, or countries who are in the phase of implementing new programs, those in orange. We also know some other countries who in the meantime have been active as well. Next slide, please. So topic and thematic areas of innovation, which are most often named by innovators as well as policymakers, are integrated systems and the coupling of the electricity grid with other energy vectors. That is increasingly important. Energy storage and other measures such as e-mobility to make use of volatile renewable energy sources, flexibility services in various forms, as well as energy communities and behind the meter solutions, which are important for a people-centered clean energy transition. Next slide. The goal of regulatory experiment activities can be different depending on the program. All countries in our small survey aim for innovating new technological solutions, products or services. Some allow also for testing whole new business models, which might become mainstream in the future. Others aim for experimenting with new tariff models and increasingly the testing of new regulations as such are aimed for. Next slide. So what can we actually learn or profit from through regulatory sandboxes? We have identified and worked with actors and stakeholder groups such as the innovators and researchers who want to make the step to experimenting in the real world context. That's mainly the target group of this webinar now. Who else? Regulatory bodies and energy market commissions in charge of granting exemptions, who, for example, want to learn about new tariff models themselves or how to serve the need of future consumers. That's their intention. Ministries and agencies in charge of accelerating energy transition, who, for example, want to learn what works, want to better understand innovation barriers, and also legislators and lawmakers themselves in charge of providing the legal framework actually for a new energy system and for the transition, who, for example, want to understand and anticipate implications of law prior to its implementing in the real world context. The following policy messages are, so we will come after a short video, which you will now see the messages that we are now going to present originally meant to inform politicians and policymakers, but we try to translate what this means for you, the target group as innovators and researchers. If you find it useful, approach your regulatory bodies, funding agencies, policymakers, funders to provide the conditions for such. Before that, now you can see some countries' activities in a short video. So I give back to Magnus.
Oh, thank you, Klaus. Yeah, I will try and start the video, and it's just a couple of minutes. And as you see in the lower right corner, it's from the SEM12 event, and this is an part of an online event that you can address on if you want to see the whole thing. But this is only what we call the world tour. So I press the button, hope it will run.
Now we will put this topic into a bit of context by hearing from some of our project participants from Austria, Canada, Finland, Germany, Italy, and Spain.
In Austria, we have set up a Sandbox program that is ready to be implemented this year, with the first call for projects open in autumn. Content-wise, the program is focusing largely on smart grid innovations. And what our program is owned by the Federal Ministry of Climate Action, and together with the regulator, we as the funding agency manage the program. What we expect is that through our Sandbox program, we have an improved regulatory setup and a better innovation ecosystem that ideally has a positive impact on the transformation of the energy system.
As we look to our net zero by 2050 target, we're considering not just how to make spaces for innovation, but how that innovation is assisting in developing pathways to scale solutions and facilitate energy sector transformation in Canada. We have leadership from provinces and territories in this respect. The Ontario Energy Board, the energy regulator for the province of Ontario, developed Canada's first regulatory sandbox for energy, providing guidance and opportunity for both private sector and electricity distributors. Another example comes from the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board's newly created Innovation Justification Criteria, which is connecting greater learning from a federally funded innovation project back into the regulatory process. Natural Resources Canada's Innovation and Electricity Regulation Initiative will continue to study these and other examples of innovation within the context of energy regulation in search of collaborative program opportunities. We thank our international colleagues who participated in this ISGAN workshop series and generously shared many models and insight to consider as we embark on conversations with stakeholders in Canada about innovation and energy regulation.
In Finland, we have had very good, very open discussion on need of regulatory sandboxes and on their role of bringing new innovations forward. For us, the topic is currently developing, so the Iscan project has helped us a lot in understanding the variety of options here. For us, it's very clear that the societal goals linked to energy transition, digitalization, sector integration are creating new needs for new kind of experiments. We see highly relevant areas like energy communities, flexibility markets, coupling of electricity and district heating networks, for instance. Our regulation has been developing well, and we are now considering more systematic approaches for running the experiments, as sandboxes or other similar mechanisms. We also see that the EU-level frameworks have strong impact on our implementation nationally, and this underlines the role of international collaboration. So for us, the Iscan project has been a great opportunity that has helped us a lot on our path.
So what's happening in Germany with regards to regulatory experiments? Germany has just finished its major 4-year demonstration program called SINTEC, Smart Energy Showcases for the Energy Transition. And it included 5 major demonstration projects. And an important element of this has been the so-called SINTEC ordinance, the purpose of which was to test new technologies, procedures, business models in practice, and at the same time make sure that the companies, the participants, don't face any disadvantages, financial disadvantages, because they test these new solutions under the current regulatory framework. So it provided an exemption clause, a kind of regulatory experiment. This has triggered a lot of debate and activity on how such an approach can also be used in the future, in future programs, and how it can be developed further. And for that, I think it's very helpful to have this international exchange and this international learning that is provided here with the Iscan project.
I've been very happy to participate in the works of ISGAN for the policy messages on innovation. This group has been very active, and the results, I think, are extremely interesting. They are based on a active dialogue among several countries and several bodies, research bodies, regulatory bodies, entrepreneurial bodies. The topic of innovation is of utmost importance for us as regulatory authority. We, in our country, the penetration of renewable is extremely high and is expected to be even higher in the next years. We already have a rather high percentage of non-programmable renewable sources energy, and especially in special days like summer, sunny Sundays, the situation is very critical, let's say, and therefore we must exploit as much as possible the renewable and all the resources, especially active demand and storage and so on. So innovation is really an important matter to cope with the transformation challenge in a future-proof manner, let's say. That is the most important thing for us. The sustainability of the system and the economic benefit for all consumers coming from renewables and system transformation. So the regulatory authority is very keen in supporting innovation at different levels. We already have several kinds of pilot regulations. That means a regulatory framework that is introduced for the first time in a transitional way in order to cope with the novel in the system. We launched a pilot regulation, for instance, for flexibility services, aggregation of the distributed resources, but also for dialogue between the smart meter and the in-home devices, or even recently for electric vehicle recharges. Using smart meter, we want to give the possibility, give a signal for smart charging during night hours. So I repeat, innovation is extremely relevant, and we in Italy have already good legal powers for that as regulatory authority, but this is not the same in all European countries. Therefore, I think it's important to have a good a baseline for all regulators able to introduce and foster innovation. Thank you very much.
Different stakeholders in Spain are very enthusiastic about the developments of regulatory pilot projects or sandboxes. Spain has already approved the regulation of sandboxes, but is currently working on specifying the detailed procedures to approve such projects. The Spanish Association of Smart Grids, Futured, is working on proposing some guidelines for presenting sandboxes to the regulator, specifically on flexibility at distribution electricity networks. The Iscan activity of sandboxes has contributed in Spain to initiate this national dialogue among a wide range of stakeholders to get aware about the international experiences and also the national challenges on the developments of sandboxes. The ministry and other stakeholders have also participated into international workshops, and they have brought the discussion to the national context.
Now we will put.
Sorry.
Now.
Oh, sorry for that. Yeah, thank you. That was the world tour, and apologies for any glitches with sound. I got some messages that we lost Urban Hiker sometimes there, but I don't think we really have time to revisit the video. Luckily, we have you, Urban, in the panel later on here. So, but before going to the panel, we will actually get to know about the findings, the main findings out of the project, actually being the policy messages. So again, I hand over the word to Klaus and to Dirk, so you can both carry us through the results, the policy messages. So please.
Yeah, thank you. I will start again with the first two policy messages. First of all, we talk about regulatory experiments as a relatively broad term, but in the discussion, also with the different stakeholders in different countries, it became clear that there's a range of different models for such regulatory experiments, and they should be selected and adapted depending on the specific situation. So there's no one-size-fits-all model. And there are also different terms. One important difference is certainly that on the one hand, there are these sandbox programs that I mentioned already before, that are mainly to enable innovation. So there is a regulatory exemption to bring, to move technical innovations, pilot projects forward. And then on the other hand, there are things like regulatory pilots, which are really more driven by the regulator, and that are designed to explore new solutions for the new regulatory framework. So it's not just an exemption. It's not just something you don't have to consider in the regulatory framework, but it's an alternative for a future regulatory framework. So that's an important difference. And I mean, then there are also different other differences, like the size of the experiment. For example, some are more small-scale pilots, but there are also examples of more countrywide regulations that are tested. So there's also, in that respect, there's a range of different approaches. That's the first policy message that came out of this process. And the second one is regulatory experiments are about learning. So obviously you do an experiment because you want to learn something so that you can have more knowledge for future action. And this learning is particularly strong if you have also a regulatory, an experimental design that is geared towards this learning. So it's important how you design the experiment. If you set up an evaluation program, for example, if it is aligned with a broader transition strategy for which you can learn, and so on. And it's important that Klaus already mentioned these different actors that can learn, and it's important that this learning is the experiment is designed that the learning is relevant for all of them. And in terms of companies, innovators, I think it's also important to keep in mind that on the one hand, they have a regulatory problem with their new solution that they want to overcome. But I think it's also important to understand for innovators that that there's also an interest from, or should be an interest from regulators to learn from these experiments. And at the end of the day, this should go hand in hand. So that's the second message.
Yeah, so the third policy message, can we, yeah, we're there already, thank you. So regulatory experiments are all the more powerful the broader the range of actors is, which gets involved as well as orchestrated. The range of competences of national administration varies significantly. So, for example, in some countries, like in Canada, market regulation, competences are large. In those countries, they are the responsibility of the state. The responsibility of the province. We'll hear about Ontario later. And in other countries, it's different. Apart from regulatory authorities, other stakeholders can play an important role, which are not considered as incumbent actors and stakeholders. For example, particularly in energy communities, citizen actors from other sectors, such as the mobility sector, can be involved. Next slide, please. So the fourth policy message, regulatory experiments for smart grids, particularly, need an effective legal basis. Smart grid technologies often challenge the existing regulatory construct and associated legislations that was designed with a very different role for customers, utilities, the private sector in mind. Not in all countries are regulatory bodies entitled to grant exemptions, in addition to the principal duty to set the regulatory framework for all. Finally, where there may not be a legal barrier of regulatory experimentation, there may be a practical barrier. For example, regulatory bodies are often constrained in their resources when considering the pace of change. They cannot react as they might want to. So if you are interested in this, you should also inform yourself about the legal conditions in your country.
Yeah, thank you, Klaus and Dirk. So now we are, and now we have the background, we have the messages, and we also now have a panel, and the kind of main focus here, that's actually the focus of the whole webinar, is about translation into Innovators' world. Yeah, I hand the word to you, Klaus, again, and you will moderate the panel, and meanwhile you can take the opportunity to write any questions in the chat, please, and we will also have a Q&A session after the panel, so please.
Okay, maybe we can check if Urban, Heike, and Rachel are also with us.
Hey there, I hope you can hear us.
Hi, perfect. Urban.
Very good.
And is Rachel here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great, perfect. Hi, the three of you. Yeah, I mean, we have heard now a little bit about theory, so we would like to get your views on what this really can mean for the innovators, for the practitioners. So I want to go to you and ask you to also look at it from the perspective of your country or a province. And I have three questions, and I would like to ask all of you what you want to contribute. And after that, we'll have the Q&A session. Okay, so Nicole, do you want to start? My first question would be, how can new projects on smart energy systems learn from our project, from the Sandbox 2.0 project, and also the policy messages that we just heard?
Okay, thanks for the floor and the question, Klaus. I will tell about, from the Dutch perspective, what we see is that we have a lot of projects dealing with technical innovation to meet up with the energy transition, and they meet the limits within the regulatory framework. And with these kind of advisories from the insights we learned in this KTP on regulatory sandbox, it is for the projects a possibility to see, okay, where are possibilities for me to, for instance, make my business case better, or how can I deal with new tariff structures within my projects? What did other projects learn from it, and how can I incorporate? And so you don't have to, as we say in the Netherlands, find out the wheel again. So that's the main important outcome for us. Learn from other examples and give the energy transition projects who are working on innovation some munition to continue and to go forward together.
Thank you. Yeah, then maybe Rachel, you work in Ontario. Maybe you can also say a little bit about where you work and about your learnings. And
sure, sounds great. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. So I lead the Ontario Energy Board's Innovation Sandbox. The Ontario Energy Board is the provincial energy regulator in Ontario, the province of Ontario in Canada. And similar to what Nicole said, we hear a lot about the energy transition and how innovation is critical to helping the sector evolve towards a cleaner, greener sector. But those are great things to say and wonderful aspirations, but the energy systems are complex and innovation is often highly technical and complex as well. And when it intersects with the regulatory frameworks and the regulatory landscape, you get an even greater deal of complexity. So testing things out before implementing them fully is a really good way to learn, both for the companies doing the testing, but also for the regulators like the Ontario Energy Board, for government, for system operators. It's a way to test technologies that might have a lot of promise in a real world environment where you can see, do these technologies actually deliver what we expected them to? Are they providing real value to customers, to ratepayers? Are they providing value to the system? And is there a way to quantify that value? Can we somehow measure it so that we can somehow maybe develop a cost benefit estimate of these technologies and what they can provide into the future? Another thing I'd like to mention is that, the unknown is always difficult for politicians, policymakers to grapple with. So the more that a technology or a new innovation, a new business model can be proven in a pilot setting, the easier it will be for regulators and policymakers to be more comfortable with adopting that and to allowing those things to proceed on a more permanent basis.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Ruben, we're sorry that we couldn't hear the full video, but yeah.
I can probably just add to what has been skipped quickly. I think it's important, and it probably is in that sense important as well to understand my answer probably to your question with regard to learning. In Austria, we have been setting up a sandbox program that is resting on 3 pillars. And one is that we try to give advice both by the regulator and the funding agency. And I myself represent the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, which is a funding agency for applied research. So there's an extensive advisory period, and that is one pillar. And the second pillar is the experiment itself, which I think is what people have most in mind when they think about the sandbox experiment. And the third pillar is the regulatory learning, so taking up the insights that have been gathered from the advisory period and from the experiment itself. And all three pillars are equally important in our understanding to get real learning. And I think learning it has been mentioned many times today, and I think it's very crucial, but I would like to emphasize on one thing that is important for us as a funding agency, and that this is the aspect of sharing risk. So whenever a project is potentially beneficial to the overall welfare, but cannot be done because the individual project risks are too high, that is where we have a certain logic to intervene or to support. And this is not only true, of course, for technical risks, this is increasingly important for non-technical aspects if you think about the energy transition. So there are a lot of associated risks that you as an innovator would like to share with someone, and we as a funding agency can provide both financial support, and this is basically our core business, but in the Sandbox program now, we can reduce the regulatory risk as well, both through the experiment, but as well through an extensive advisory period. And this is for us, I think, an important aspect next to the learning that everyone can gather.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, then a second question would be, what do you as funders, regulatory bodies, ministries expect from innovators and researchers that come up with Sandbox ideas? I'm sure you will hear a lot about new ideas, project proposals. Maybe, shall we start with Urban now?
What we would like to see is that we get basically, because our logic is to promote technological innovation. Basically, this is one of our core aspects, and we would like to see a better scalability and replicability of innovative energy solutions. So questions of user acceptance and market and business models are of central importance if you speak about scalability and replicability. This is why we are involved in this. And as an innovator, of course, if you participate in a Sandbox program, you're not only much quicker in answering those questions of user acceptance and business models, but you can rely on more evidence through a living lab setup. And this is, I think, a very good reason for innovators to participate in a Sandbox program. And we usually like to see projects that are cooperative in nature. So it's not only one business entity that does a project, but usually they are obliged to cooperate with a research institution in the project itself, which of course improves the quality of the methods, testing the user acceptance and the business model. We organize as well an accompanying research to organize a cross-project learning that helps us to gather all the learnings and lift it to the programming and policy level.
Thank you. Yeah, Nicole, for you the situation I think is a little bit different, but when people come, or do they come to you, what do you say?
Yes, it's indeed a little bit different. I work for the Dutch Energy Agency, try to support technical innovation solutions. We have had experimental space, and we combine now those two together. And what Urban also told, if you want to do something within technical innovation projects, you need to be aware what the needs from regulatory space are. If they are limiting you, what are your wishes for extending some limits, or what are your possibilities to work with new solutions? But the most important thing in that is, if you do that, you must be sure that you are working within the complete field chain of people you need to do the project. So it's not only a technical innovation, but it's also social innovation. And you need to talk with your municipalities, with the national law makers, to see how can we make the next step from our project and make sure that all the information is gathered is also be able to use in next projects. So it's important to think within your projects about the future, not only that you are finding your solution, but you make sure that the answers or the questions you're working with, that you take care of it in a larger group and share all that information. We are now in a period that we are making new legislation with all the knowledge we learned from the regulatory sandboxes. Where is the limits are more stretched needed or not, and how can we implement that in new subsidiary programs in the future? So that's a learning we take off in that.
Yeah, thank you. And now I'm really curious, Rachel. I know a little bit about the other two programs, but can you tell us? So, what do you expect from the proposals?
Sure. So in the Ontario Energy Board Sandbox, we're mostly interested not on technical demonstrations of sort of new technology, but on technology that's to some extent already proven, but that can be, where there's real potential for value to consumers. So we are interested in people bringing forward projects that with technology that may be new, or maybe, at least new in Ontario. But what we want to see is that the project proponents are using this technology to provide a new service, something that adds new or different kind of value to the consumers and or to the system. So that's what we're most interested in. There's also a number of other criteria that we look at when we're thinking about these projects. As I mentioned, it should be innovative to Ontario. It doesn't necessarily need to be innovative to the world. It should be able to, we want to have some degree of certainty that customers won't be harmed when this pilot project is taking place. And because the Ontario Energy Board Sandbox is led by the regulator rather than government, we can only offer regulatory relief from those parts of regulation that the OEB has control over. So if somebody comes forward and says there's a law and we can't do this innovation because there's a law in place that doesn't allow us to do it, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do in the context of our sandbox. So those are a few things that we like our project proponents to keep in mind.
Yeah, thank you so much for all this information. Now, for me, maybe Magnus, do we already have some questions? Because I don't want to take the time of the Q&A.
We do actually.
Because we are already quite ahead. I would have other questions, but if the audience has questions.
Yeah, we have actually. We have one question is applicability. It's Mark McLeish, I think it's pronounced. I would be interested to know if regulatory sandbox arrangement internationally also apply to innovation in the gas sector, gas networks, markets, and services. Do we know anything about gas sector?
I can speak for myself, and the Ontario Energy Board Sandbox is open to electricity and natural gas participants.
Okay, interesting.
This is same for Austria with regard to grid tariffs. We don't differentiate between electricity grid tariffs and gas network tariffs. So that would be particularly with regard to hydrogen, of course, something that is potentially been taken into account. Nevertheless, the whole drive certainly came from the smart grids direction, not so much from the gas direction.
Okay.
And for us, within the regulatory sandbox we had, it was mainly focused on electricity. But on the other hand, if you look at the energy transition, we are looking at the complete field of energy usable streams, and then gas is a part of it.
Okay. Thank you. Klaus, may I go along with the next question we have?
Yes, I think
questions are coming in here. Yeah, next one is from Colleen Kaiser. Is the Ontario Energy Board Sandbox explicitly linked to a broader low carbon transition strategy? Oh, I'm reading that. Is the OEB Sandbox explicitly linked to a broader low carbon transition strategy? maybe that's the first question. It comes another question along, but you can start with that, Rachel, maybe, if you got it.
So the Ontario Energy Board Sandbox is linked to the strategic sort of goals of the OEB, and you know, so some of those goals relate to innovation specifically. Other ones relate to, a lot of them relate to sort of bringing consumer value and ensuring that, you know, we don't just do innovation for the sake of innovation, but rather that the innovation is purposeful and that the purpose is to deliver value to the system, to ratepayers, et cetera. So our strategic plan also does include sort of a vision of, you know, acknowledgement of decarbonization and the importance of that. And particularly, you know, the government of Canada has a commitment to net zero. And we also have in Canada a carbon price that applies. So, you know, those things are intrinsic to, you know, the impact on the energy system of having a net zero commitment and a price on carbon means that the system has to change or will change because of the choices consumers make, because it will become more expensive to continue using fossil fuels. So given that consideration, the sandbox, you know, the projects that come through the sandbox are viewed in light of those considerations, I would say.
Okay, very good, very good. There is a follow-up question, but I think you answered that one also, so we don't go into that one. We have to check time. It's 3 minutes to go if we would like to keep time, and I think we should. Could we have one more, Klaus? Or
yeah, I think so. It's better to answer the question of the audience. We can meet each other more often, so please go ahead.
Let me see. Oh, it's coming more and more questions here. Does exist a kind of guideline to propose a regulatory sandbox in a country? Does it exist a kind of guideline to propose a regulatory sandbox in a country? That's a good question. I'm interested both in the case of a country that already enabled it and the case of not. An anonymous attendee says, anyhow, did you get it, Klaus? Or I don't know if you could maybe reply on that one, or is it too broad maybe? Guideline to propose in a country, I mean regulatory.
Yeah, maybe Urban, could you, I assume when you have a call that you have some guidelines?
I understood it more in the sense of like a blueprint that you could use for a regulatory sandbox. And I don't know, maybe as I'm speaking already, I tried to give an answer. What I really witnessed in participating in this Iscan knowledge exchange was that there's a very broad variety of concepts and approaches and notions and hopes and motivations for sandbox programs, as many as there are participants probably. And to me, it doesn't seem there's only one common denominator to all the approaches, and that means that it is about to establish an intensified dialogue between stakeholders that have not been yet in dialogue before. So either the regulator talks now better or more intensively with the RDI community, or the lawmakers talk to the regulator, or what. It is really very specific to the context where you come from. So I think it's very difficult to speak about the blueprint. First, my advice would be, first, where do you see a bottleneck in the overall innovation value chain, so to say, and then see who has to be linked. And then that would be my first starting point if you want to set up a regulatory sandbox program.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe Dirk, do you want to add something? You have made a comparative study, an interesting one.
Yeah, in a project we looked at different regulatory experiment programs and sandboxes, not just in the energy sector, but also beyond, also different countries. And from that, we tried to compile some general guidelines, what needs to be considered when setting up such a program or regulatory experiments. I've just put the link to these guidelines into the chat as an answer to that question.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Dirk.
Great. Is there Nicole, Rachel, what is your view on that?
I think Ruben said it very well.
I agree.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to keep track of the time here, and we are actually, the hour is gone. So, but I very much appreciated it myself. I don't know if you have any final words from the panel, or you, Klaus and Dirk, or if we just say thank you all for attending, and to be continued. I mean, this is not going to be the end. It's going to be the start for I think going deeper into the collaboration internationally. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot,
Yeah.
and can still learn a lot. And I think all of us hope that this kind of instruments can help to accelerate the energy transition in the future.
Maybe we can also add that we have a community of practice that is actually gathering, and we're meeting also for the time to come. So if you want to be, if you're not part of that community of practice, you are most welcome to join also, and we can continue learning from each other's work. So thank you all for joining. I don't know if we want to have a final word from the Annex 8 from Matteo, or otherwise I'm happy, and thank you all.
Yeah.
And
thank you.